Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Brew, CMO at Agent Moves, and welcome to our Good to Great series. We're all about sharing amazing stories of top realtors and how they got there so we can help make more realtors great. So let's jump in today with our guest. I'd like to welcome Alissa Gamble. Hello, Alissa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So people that know that have been watching some of these know I like to start with something kind of different about the agent, to get to know them a little bit more outside of real estate. Some really interesting stuff on Alissa. There's so much, but she was studying to be. She wanted to be an ambassador, studying business, and did a lot of traveling. In college, studies French, which she's in Boise, Idaho, as she has told me. It's not something you're speaking every day, I guess, in Boise, but what a run to think about being an ambassador, getting involved in business, and we'll talk about the transition over to real estate. But tell us a little bit about the journey of, starting to want to be an ambassador.
Yeah, I mean, it really started with being travel. I always, and it was probably in junior high that I realized I wanted to do business. So even in high school, I did some trade. I mean, I worked in the afternoon. I went to classes in the morning and did some sort of work, a high school study thing where I got to go work in an office. And so being an ambassador just embraced travel and business. And I've always been a good communicator. And so that also seemed to be a big portion of that role.
All right. And then, okay, so now you start studying French. I take it you speak pretty well. What are you doing with that, day to day basis? And you have someone to talk to?
No, I really, not often. Sometimes my friends ask me to speak it, but I'm sure I'd pick it back up when I haven't been back to France. I actually went back to Europe, but we didn't make it to France with my group, so not much. But it was a great time and a good perspective bringing for my years to come. So it was a great opportunity when I was young.
All right, excellent, excellent. Yeah, I'm sure interestingly, there are great niches. I find dealing with, speaking to maybe close to 100 agents now, and the ones that do have some unique niches, like speaking a language, where you're in a market where, we have an agent who speaks Arabic in LA. Right. So very different, right? In a popularized area like that with so much community. He's able to do things also with referrals and so forth. But we'll talk about the French thing later. But I think there's could be some kind of unique niche thing for you with French. So tell us now, okay, you come back, you've done some traveling, looking at business. Tell us a little about the journey getting started in real estate.
Yeah, I actually accidentally fell into it. I was working a corporate job and I'm looking at some other opportunities. And my dad needed an assistant. It was one of my big failures that launched me was I was fired from my previous job, which was devastating and really had me take a step back and allowed me to get into real estate as an assistant. And my dad had been doing it for 30 years when I got in, and so was pretty well established. And he was also moving into ownership leadership at his brokerage. So my real entry to real estate was being his assistant and administering the new agent training.
Mm-hmm.
So for the first 2 years, that's what I did. I sat through 12 sessions of new agent training.
Great. And then, okay, tell us about that first year. You're a solo agent. You get out there now into the action.
Well, it took me a while. So I got in 2005 as my dad's assistant. He actually left the company a couple years later, and I stayed on staff. During my period with him, he got me licensed, but I really wasn't selling. I was on salary.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my early 20s. And then I ended up in 2007 after I had been a relocation director for the brokerage. So I'd been passing out leads. And then I moved over to my dad's brokerage, which was just me, him, and one other agent. And then we all know what happened in 2007. So that's basically, I think June of 2007 is when I started.
Okay.
With him, and the market kind of went down from there. And I knew no different, but he let me go. He actually, in 2008, November of 2008, I had a lot of things happen to me. I had a house burn down. I got married the next month, and then found out I was pregnant, and then my dad laid me off. So all of that in the span of like a quarter. And that's what's launched me into solo. We moved to Keller Williams in '09, spring of '09. And that kind of exposed me to all of what, other people outside call the Kool-Aid was I nothing. My dad hadn't even, he'd showed me naturally what he'd learned, but not with the depth. So like I am a continual learner. Yeah, I went to school, college just naturally because that's what I wanted to do. So like I love all the education at Keller
Yeah.
Williams.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say the successful, and we're only talking to the most successful agents within these interviews, and heavily in Keller Williams. And I like the way you say, yeah, like drinking the Kool-Aid, because others outside talk about it. But I see the reality of the coaching, of the training, of the education. I mean, it's amazing, to hear it from the agents just like you. Maybe you had to drink the Kool-Aid in the beginning, but then when you know it works, and then you turn it into your own, right?
Yeah.
So tell us how now, okay, got the solo agent business going. Tell us about those first couple of years, numbers of transactions, and then how do you decide you want to start a team?
Yeah, I mean, I really actually wasn't ever solo for too long. So me and my dad both moved over, but I was the one to encourage it. I was starting a few short sales. I think I did 5 transactions my first year, but kind of by accident with my dad when he was out of town or whatever, a lot of his clients. And we moved over to Keller Williams, and the market was very tough here in Boise. We were 50 to 60%, distressed, and a lot inventory skyrocketed because we went way up. And so he said it was the hardest market he ever experienced. And so when we came over to here to Keller Williams, he one day told me, your need and desire for more business does not make my desire to go get it anymore. Get out of here. And so I went to the leadership here and said, I need another team who will help me with the things that I knew I was not good at. So I always knew that I'm good at a few things and I'm really bad at all the rest. And so I've always wanted to do it with people. So I joined a team, and it was the best and worst 6 months because it was a bunch of failures on that team. And I didn't know she was a new team. We changed our name 3 times, our email 3 times. Half the time I was there for about 8 months. We didn't have staff, which is really what I wanted, was some administrative leverage. And I was pregnant during that time, had a baby, and I did 12 deals, and they were all for myself. And so I went to her to negotiate my commission split, and she said, you need to do this on your own. So I got a little mini office. I remember it's right actually over here where I still am at. And I cried, and then said, pick yourself up. I very quickly, within the first 90 days, hired somebody for like $10 an hour for 10 hours a week. And that helped me propel, like you guys were saying, his database I knew was big. And I've just never been afraid to go look for people smarter and gone farther than me. And what helped me was going to our OP, Erica Hill, who's amazing and done lots of amazing things. She's been with KW since like the early days. And she's the one that said, look, I get you. Because I was like, I don't have much business. And she said, just start with a little leverage that will help you. And that's really what helped propel me to start kind of even a group or a small. And then I had an agent one day like fall in my lap. She was dating my cousin, and she was an assistant, and she'd quit that day, and I just called to check in on her. So it was like destiny. And
Wow.
she said, did Aaron tell you I quit? And I was like, no. She was working for another agent and licensed. And I said, well, get on over here. And I thought she was just going to join I didn't know I needed it or I was going to do a team. I was probably had done 24 units that year. And she said she wanted to work with me. And so by clear accident, I was like, okay, sure. And I think I'd done like 15 buyers and like 6 listings that year. And by bringing her on and my past bad experience on a team, I gave all my buyers to her, which left her, pretty busy and learning very quickly. And I then, I didn't know how to get listings, but that's all I had to do other than give her my buyers. So I took that next year I took 42 listings, and I think we closed 50. So like it just with the assistant, she had moved up to full time. And there our team began.
Wow, just beautiful. So, looking to share nuggets of, great in how that started, something falling into your lap is one thing, but you said something before that I want to bring up is you knew what you weren't good at and what you were good at, right? And so knowing that early on, I think is a great piece of advice, for other agents as they're looking to, form that beginning of the team or knowing even what kind of assistant you need. So how did you look at breaking that up? What you were not good at?
Yeah, I mean, Keller Williams is big on personality assessments and really knowing the right seat on the bus. So I paid the money to have what they used to have called the AVA, and I really, the problem with the AVA is you really had to know it and understand, that what you were, a 9623, asterisk 5, whatever
Mhm.
it was. But I dug into that and learned it. And I understood again that I wasn't that great at the details. But I was good at communicating and what I'd call the kitchen table appointment and advising and consulting. And then I just started surrounding myself with people better than me. And I really I mean, my last 15 years, that's what I'm really good at, is knowing humans. And what I continue to grow at is how to help grow, whether it's clients or my own team now. I mean, that's what I'm passionate about, is helping people bridge the gap to where they are, to where they want to go.
So how did you got started? Okay, got the word on, this kind of falling in your lap, like you said a little bit, but then things really took off. So then as you go to bring in new agents, I know you have about 14 agents now and a backroom staff. Tell us about how you were bringing those agents on and some tips on what you look for in hiring a new agent.
Yeah, I mean, pretty shortly after I hired, her name was Tara, came on the team as my buyer's agent. I came in and I was learning, and I learned the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and I read that book, and I started just following it. It made sense to me. So I'm a questioner, but again, if it makes sense, I'm just going to fall right in line. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. So, I was the listing agent, she was the buyer agent, and then I didn't even realize, I think, what we were doing, because I think we just put our head down and went. And I think I hired a coach. So Ray Wayne, she's an OG of Keller Williams. She was my first coach, and it was a lot of money, I remember. And I only started like $500 a month. And then, the big one is going to 1,000. But I started making more money and then hired her within, I think, 6 months to go to a weekly. So that really catapulted. But in the early days, for a couple years, it was just us three. And then I again fell into somebody, a past client, who was in car sales. And she applied to be my assistant because my other assistant wanted to move towards transaction management. So I was kind of just growing first support, because
Mhm.
me and Tara were doing our business every year. So we just needed more leverage. And that person was not going to be my assistant through the personality, but I realized she could call and set appointments for me. So before really an ISA was an ISA, or what we knew what that was, I was like she became my ISA, that I grew her into that model. And that model kind of came out right as I was like, she was already trying to set appointments. And, I helped the other people doing it, helped me really systemize and process it. But we kind of just entrepreneurially fell into that. And then that's when I was like, Tara was just too busy. We had too many buyers. And so we went to the market center, and they helped us find an agent who's still with me today. I'm actually going to go on an appointment later today with him.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So now you've built this team. I mean, just beautiful, 14 agents back, 4 in the back room, I think you said. How do you keep them busy? How are you keeping leads flowing?
Yeah, so back then I did all the listings. And so they gave me some listings. I had an ISA or an OSA setting me expired and FISBO appointments. And then I also paid for Zillow leads. And then I've always been big on my database. So every single buyer went out to them. And it was mainly by referral. Like Tara had a friend that got in the business. And so she ended up being Tara's showing assistant, showing agent, which morphed into really partner agents, because Melissa is an excellent agent and quickly grew into that role. And then I started intentionally, just hiring. And we ended up, I think in 2015, we did just under 250 units, which was huge
Huge.
back then. A big accomplishment. And the next step really was a lot of fail forwards. Is I was in my 30s by then and had ventures of taking over the world, as I think we often do in our 30s. And I joined an expansion team in the early days. So I am a pioneer, I think, in a lot of things because it was really back then not. There was no model or there was 15 different models. And I joined an expansion team with the former regional director of Keller Williams and became like Idaho's regional director and eventually rolled into being a regional director of the Pacific Northwest. So I got out of production,
Right.
left kind of my team here with some leadership and grew and recruited eventually 9 teams that joined underneath the expansion team.
Wow. Wow. So now what's happened today? You're back to just running your team.
Yeah, there was a lot of fail forwards. We shifted models several times. And it ended, I would never take that back. And there was a lot of asphalt, space on asphalt scraping, leadership adventures, because at some point I had about 60 agents underneath me. And like I said, Idaho's a little spread out. And I was flying to Oregon and Washington, driving. I had a team in Sun Valley and Idaho Falls. So a lot of travel. And 2019, it just was not moving forward. And so shifted the model yet again and came back to Boise. And as I stepped out of leadership, one of my learning lessons is first, don't get out of production, because I completely stepped out and my whole database, as I'm sure you know, slowly simmered to barely a bubble.
Yeah.
And that was a big source of business for even my agents. And then, I just grew a little. I think when you're in the trenches, you can be a better consultant and coach to your agents. So in 2019, I got back into production. When I left production, I did 120 listings. And then I kind of shifted my model to allow all my agents to do both. So I could go run this region. And when I got back in, now I do about 15 to 24 units a year, and I'll go on appointments with my agents, but it's a much better work-life balance. I get to know my clients. I mean, that's what I was moving away from. I think when I joined it was like next, 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 next. I could build no relationships. I couldn't barely remember my clients when I saw them 6 months later. I was like, and it just didn't feel authentic to me. And so, when I came back, it's now like, how do I do this right? And I wanted to kind of reduce it was about when I was in my late 30s, 40s, was like, look, I can build something really impactful here locally and also get to see my kids grow up.
Right. Right. No, this is great. I mean, great advice and nuggets within here. I've heard a number of agents, even solo, that built teams, and then just went back to solo. Similar reasons. They were getting away from the customer. All of a sudden, their business, right, while they were spending so much time recruiting, training, building the teams, figuring all this out, they lost contact with their own customer and lost that side of the income, right? Which was just, if they would have kept it going, would have just been solid, right? To keep that while they were doing others. So some advice I've heard is don't get too far ahead of yourself. I think, like you were saying, don't get out of production as an example, so that you're always in it, so you can always have that customer base, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
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 Would you say that is, let's leave the audience with kind of two things. One, best tip you can give them could be just general work approach to it, doesn't have to be so specific. And then I really love the ones where, which you've said, like the failing fast, failing forward, or those one or two failures that help you get to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard Gary on stage say, average people or successful people fail more times than average people try. So, each failure to me is not a failure, it's feedback. And that's from NLP, is there is no failure, only feedback. And so that's what I take each one is, okay, what is the universe trying to tell me? What do I need to learn? And, to always have a long-term goal. It's not, the journey is about who you become. And so, that's as I look back to that time that was challenging. You just can't have good without bad too, because you've got to have the inverse.
Yeah.
And challenging really makes you you learn so much more when it's hard than when it's easy. And so I think things just kind of happened accidentally in the beginning of my career. And I think it's because I followed a model without question. And then as I started to really stretch and go beyond, that's when I learned a lot of lessons.
Beautiful. I really love it. Thank you so much, Alissa, for your time. For you watching, please follow Alissa on social media. I'm sure there's a lot there and a lot to learn. Just a great story. I love hearing these, teams that are, building a team over 10 people, I think is just absolutely incredible. Even though you've been through this, some things, saying things fall into your lap, you make these things happen. So yeah, seeing the challenges and overcoming them and, running a business like you have today is just absolutely amazing. And please follow Alissa and follow Agent Moves as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And until next time, again, Alissa, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. My pleasure.